Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Toddcast, bringing you unbiased, student-created, politics-based broadcasting made possible by the Schar School of Policy and Government. On this week's episode, we are going to be discussing mail-in voting. I'm Mariam, and I'm here with Imani.
As millions of Americans prepare to vote in November, and in many cases primaries and state local elections through the summer as well, lots of people are talking about voting by mail. It is a way to protect the integrity of the country's voting system and to limit potential exposure to the coronavirus, which continue to spread widely in the U.S.
There have been a lot of critics of mail-in voting, including President Donald Trump, who have cast doubt on the integrity of mail-in voting, even though a lot of states have been voting by mail in the past. Conservative groups are suing to limit mail-in voting, and some federal judges seem reluctant to defend voter rights if it means intervening in state-level decisions. The president's re-election campaign is suing to block mail-in voting at the same time it pushes his backers to be ready to vote by mail. The evidence we reviewed finds that voting by mail is rarely subject to fraud, does not give an advantage to one political party over another, and can in fact inspire public confidence in the voting process if done properly. So we're going to be discussing these a little bit further, and we're going to start by talking about how voter fraud is probably the number one thing that people bring up when they talk about mail-in voting. Voter fraud is rare overall, and even rarer by mail. When voter fraud does occur, election administrators identify it and take action immediately, prosecuting those responsible. That actually happened in North Carolina in 2018 when a Republican political activist paid others to collect incomplete absentee ballots so that they could be filled out in order to vote for a Republican candidate. The activist was arrested, charged, and convicted, and the entire election was invalidated and run again. In addition, problems are extremely rare in states that rely primarily on voting by mail. Of course, any voting system must be protected against fraud, and election officials are already doing that, including prosecuting fraud attempts.
Another argument that people have against mail-in voting is the fact that it'll give one party an advantage over the other one. But again, we found that that's not really the case. Allowing people to vote by mail does not give one party an advantage over the other in terms of party members who turn out to vote or the outcome of the election. As far back as 2001, Oregon's vote by mail system was found not to disproportionately mobilize or discourage voting by Democrats or Republicans. In 2008, a study found little difference between Democratic and Republican voters in Los Angeles County in terms of who voted by absentee ballots or mail-in ballots, or whose ballots were disqualified. A more recent survey has found that people of all political stripes who are concerned about the coronavirus pandemic and who just want to stay home in general support letting everyone vote by mail.
In addition, the public can start to actually learn to trust mail-in voting. There's one problem with mail-in voting, but it's a problem with voting overall. In a 2019 Gallup poll found that 59% of Americans lack confidence in the honesty of elections for a range of reasons, including concerns about interference from foreign powers or domestic political elite security worries and general frustration. Americans' confidence is lower than that is reported in almost every other democratic country. However, research from California in 2011 found that frequent public communications from election officials can increase voters' faith in voting by mail.
In as uncertain times as these, mail-in voting is safe, reliable, and trustworthy. All the evidence that we found leading up to this discussion led us to believe that led us to some very clear conclusions. Voting by mail is, or with training of election officials, voting by mail is and can be made just as honest as in-person voting. Officials can help ensure public confidence by being transparent and communicating their plans and preparations. And as far as we've seen, this has been the case for most states and most voting posts. People are more interested in voting by mail than ever before because of the pandemic. It's really not that safe to be out and about, and especially not in closed confines to be voting. Epidemiology indicates that voting from home is safer than going to a crowded public building to vote. The public needs to understand that results of the vote may not be clear for days after election. It takes longer for election workers to open, verify signatures, and count mail ballots than it does to run voting machines, and some states, such as Michigan, don't permit mail ballots to be opened until Election Day.
But when the tallies are announced, if large numbers of Americans have voted by mail, the public can feel confident that the process was fair and the results are accurate. Of course, this is going to take some time and it's going to take some getting used to. These are, again, I've heard it, I know a lot of other people have heard it as well over and over again. these are unprecedented times. This is new to a lot of people. However, this is not an entirely new process. Like we mentioned, there are several states that have relied mainly on absentee ballots and mail-in voting. So this is not a brand new process. It's just new to a lot of people. And the more we do it, the more confidence we'll have in it, and the more reliable and trustworthy it's going to be. There are a lot of concerns about elections, especially presidential elections since the last one, and the issues with the interference and Russia and all of that. So people are rightfully hesitant a little bit to trust the system that is new to them. However, it's really the most reliable system that we have right now. It's the safest for everyone right now, and I encourage a lot of people to look into it and to try your best to pursue mail-in voting instead of putting yourself and your family members at risk by going to a crowded place and trying to vote that way.
I think especially since it's not a new system of voting, that people should feel more secure in their ability to safely and securely send in their vote come election day. If this was like an entirely new measure put out by the government that like, oh, we're going to just start doing mail-in voting because of coronavirus, I would definitely understand the skepticism more and myself feel less inclined to try and do that. But the fact that it's been around for decades and that studies have shown for years and years that there is not as much of an ability to tamper with mail-in voting and that it really is the best option, especially during given these times. I mean, I understand why people wouldn't mail in their votings like a year to 4 years ago, however many years ago, when it was like perfectly fine for everyone to just go to their mail-in post. But I think now, especially with coronavirus, with just close proximity not being what anyone really wants to be doing nowadays, I think we can rest assured in the history of the mail-in ballot and what it's been able to do for people who haven't been able to go to their mail-in areas, and that because we should be grateful that we have this opportunity, like just in general, especially in the states that allow more leniency and more leeway in terms of reasons for mailing in absentee, and like don't have as much like red tape for mailing in your voting.
Absolutely. And for those of us here in Virginia, how do you recommend that we vote if we want to vote with an absentee ballot?
Great question. In Virginia, you must register to vote by October 13th. That's a hard line. And any voter in Virginia can request to vote through mail without any excuse. You don't have to have a special circumstance or anything like that to ask to mail in your vote. You can just use coronavirus or anything like that as your reason, and it'll go straight through, no questions asked. And you can apply for an absentee or mail ballot online. We're going to try and leave links down below in the description box. And the deadline to apply by mail, email, or fax is October 23rd. And the deadline, if you choose to apply in person, is October 31st. Because of the pandemic, absentee ballots no longer need to be signed by a witness, which is really great. So absentee ballots must be postmarked or dropped off in person by November 3rd and received by noon on November 6th. Ballots with a missing or eligible postmark will be counted if they arrive by then. So there's plenty of time and consideration given to people. So right now is honestly the best time I feel like to just get your things. At least go on the websites and see what you can do now, or at least get an idea of when your deadlines are coming up, because it's better now than later on when maybe there's more issues with more people sending in their ballots at the same time. But there's definitely a lot of resources out there and a lot of time right now for people to be able to send in their ballots.
Yes, and like Imani said, we'll be adding a bunch of links as well in the description if you guys are interested. There's still some time, so the sooner the better. And of course, we need to make account for the fact that there have been some delays with the USPS due to just the current situation that we've not discussed yet on the podcast. But so yeah, just make sure to give yourself some even extra time. If you wait till the last minute, it can be a little bit harder. So just make sure that you try your best and if you can vote, please, please, please vote.
Definitely. I think that's an even bigger message. One is to vote in by mail if you can, but even bigger, please vote just in general. It's a great exercise of your rights as a citizen, and it's just like a great way to be politically active and have your voice heard in any way that you can.
Yeah, and thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. This was the Toddcast. I'm Mariam, and I'm here with Imani, and hopefully you guys like it. If you would want to, check out all the links down below, and leave a comment if you would like to as well. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.